Hello, everybody.
Hey, everyone.
This is Annie.
And this is Gail.
And you're listening to Heroes
and Zeros,
a true crime podcast. I hope. I don't know what I said I hope for.
I know,
except
right?
for I hope you're listening. That's
right?
what it was.
That's right. That's right. That's right. It is a true crime podcast, but it's also, for those of you that have listened to us more than just our first ones, I hope you've also realized it's, well, I think we're funny, but maybe you don't. All
so
right,
what
guys.
are you doing today,
Gail?
Annie,
we're going back to Thailand. You know I love to travel, right?
No.
I know
you do?
And I love travel crime. And the reason I love it is because it reminds us to be diligent. And I think that as much
that
as...
is true.
Whenever you love something, you know, you always kind of forget that you always should look in the rearview mirror, what's around you. You just need to be aware.
Yes,
and
stop being complacent and on our phones.
And so it reminds me that whenever I'm traveling, just don't forget, you know, well, we now know not everybody's wonderful in this world. So I'm taking us back to Thailand again, right?
Alrighty.
And many of our listeners, as you are, Annie, are really aware, we did a story based in Thailand before.
Yep.
It was episode 10.
Is that the one that got all angry?
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? It is my favorite episode, but it's also, I feel like my worst episode. Because I feel like I interrupt a lot.
Oh,
I feel...
You knew the person.
I know, but I got so excited I interrupted.
Well,
and
I get so excited I stutter. So
it's my favorite story, but I
me.
feel I didn't do my best on that one. Anyway, episode 10, for those of you that maybe didn't listen, you might want to go back and listen to it. But if you didn't listen to this first and then go back. It's really episode 10 is this woman, it's called The Michigan Woman Kidnapped in Thailand. And it happened when I was in Thailand and was a part of the same tour group.
The old episode.
Yeah,
we did.
Yes, that's episode 10.
I thought you were getting ready to tell. No. I'm like, Gail.
I'm saying that our listeners, we did that epised 10 where
I'm following.
She was kidnapped. Yeah. Watch out, baby. This is a long one. You better
buckle in and hold onto your seatbelt booties.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I will say that when I was researching the story for my Thailand, because even though I was a part of the kidnapping tour group, I still needed to research things and wanted to see all these things, right? And so as I was researching that, I came upon this story. And so I've been saving it for a long time. And it made me want to really remind our viewers that, again, when traveling, we need to remember that all police are not the same in all areas.
True that.
Right? You need to remember this and really weigh risks, right? And usually the risk, is nothing. You're going to most likely you'll have an amazing trip. Yeah. But there is a chance, and I saw it with my own eyes, right, in episode 10. So there is a chance that something could go bad. And the thing I'm saying about this is that if you've listened to episode 10, you know that you couldn't always trust the police.
Yeah.
And so that's really what I want to remind everybody is, again, we always want to think they're there to help us. But again, that's the thing. We take that for granted in the United States and in Canada, really in North America. We take that for granted because it is not that way all around, right?
Right.
So we're going back to Thailand, and we know that there are over 25 million visitors to Thailand each year.
Cheapers.
It's because it's stunning, Annie. It's beautiful. And there's this set of 3 small islands off the East Coast. Now, where I was staying after we left Bangkok, so we went to Bangkok for a week, and then on the west side of Bangkok, there were the islands, there was Phuket, and then Phi Phi Islands, and so that was really on the...
Phi Phi Islands?
Yeah, Phi Phi. It's spelled P-H-I.
Cool.
And it's Phi Phi, and Phi Phi Islands, remember, is where Leonardo da Vinci... I know, right? Leonardo da Vinci actually filmed... beaches at that. No, not beaches. That's Bette Midler. Whatever movie that was.
Some movie.
Yeah, so they're pretty famous. And in fact,
sweet.
No, because Thailand was shut down, I hear the beaches and everything have really restored and are beautiful. They're just opening up next month, November. So
not Phi Phi, but Phi Phi.
Yeah, Phi Phi.
Cool.
Yep. Phuket, because Phuket is spelled PH also, right? Not Phuket. it's Phuket and Phi Phi Islands. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I like it.
And so, but that's where we were at, right?
Okay.
I think a little more commercialized, things like that. However, on the west side of Thailand, there's, so on the other side of the mainland Thailand, there are these 3 islands. And so you first have what they call Koh Samui. Koh Samui is the largest and most developed island. And it also is the one with the only airport, small little airport. Now, the next in size is Koh Phangan. Now, Koh Phangan is home of the famous full moon parties. Now, these parties are known for, I've even heard of these before. They're known for like drugs and debauchery. You're like, well, God, Gail, who are you that you've heard of them?
Why are you familiar?
I think it's because we're in Thailand, right? And I studied a lot about Thailand. But the full moon party takes place every month throughout the year.
As it probably would.
When is a full moon, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really attractions include things like fire skipping ropes, alcohol buckets, which are really kids' sand buckets with several straws, right? And lots of alcohol and drugs.
I just had a visual, sorry.
Yeah.
It's funny.
And then I hear it's a tradition to put on some neon body paint and really dance the whole night away. There's a very wide spectrum of music, really ranging from trance to drum to bass to reggae. And the party takes place in many clubs along what they call the Hat Rim Beach. And I'm sure there's more than a few true crime stories coming from that. But actually today, we're talking about the smallest of the 3 islands. So you have the largest one, then the middle one is the full moon parties. But we're going to talk today about the smallest of the 3, really they're popular tourist islands in that Thai Gulf. And
what's the name of that island?
And that's called Koh Tao. Koh Tao. And now, of the 25 million visitors each year to Thailand, 500,000, so very small percentage, but still 500,000 is a lot of people, come to this island of Koh Tao. Okay? And it's about 250 miles south of Bangkok, and it's known primarily for its diving. It has clear waters and coral gardens and rainbows of colorful fish. It's just...
And sharks.
It's perfect. It's just...
Awesome.
Almost paradise. Oh, Annie, I've never seen a shark the whole entire time I've ever been out on all my island trips.
Lucky girl.
But you never know. Bottom line is, though, this place, and it's just, you can't imagine how stunning. I mean, Thailand is still one of those places that my husband really wants to go back to. And want to take our boys. So, on August 25th in 2014, so
not long ago,
7 years. Oh, look at you doing that math fast.
I did.
Hannah Witheridge, who was 24, and she was a University of Essex student in England.
Okay.
She traveled to this small island with 3 other girlfriends, for what I assume was just a fun, relaxing, good time, right?
Yeah.
And also, on August 25th, David Miller. He was a civil and structural engineering graduate from Jersey. Now, not New Jersey. This Jersey is one of the UK Channel Islands. So he's also British, the same as Hannah.
Oh, awesome.
And, very good. Nice little try on the accent. David also arrived in Koh Tao with one of his buddies. And he was also there on a holiday. So
just fun times to be had.
Yep. So David arrives with his buddy. She arrives with her 3 girlfriends. They don't know each other.
Right.
And by the way, all of them were backpacking in Thailand between schooling. So Hannah had completed her undergraduate studies in education and had started postgraduate studies in speech and language therapy. David, though, was soon starting on his master's degree. He had been traveling Southeast Asia with a friend, really after completing like a 6-week work placement in Australia. So these are good kids.
Yeah, and they sound like they're very like-minded, the whole group, without knowing each other.
Yeah. They're good kids. They're smart. They're on the right track. Right?
They're focused. Yep. They're just going to have a good time because they've just been working their booties off.
That's right. Okay? Exactly. So by coincidence or love or lust
or luck
or unluck
bad
luck.
crap.
The two of them met because they were staying at the same hotel. It was called the Ocean View Bungalows, and I hear it has beautiful beach views of Sairee Beach, and just as, again, it's just an untouched, gorgeous beauty. So I'm not sure how much time the two groups of friends really spent together during their time on the island, but we do know that on the night, Saturday night, September 15th, so just 22 days after arriving, which, by the way, did seem very long to me.
Yeah.
But I have to think, okay, they're students or, they just graduated. And they're from England. And here's what I do know is that other countries take their vacations much more serious.
Yeah.
Than
or
the
they're
United
less
States.
Serious. They're just relaxed.
Right. Meaning,
I know what you mean.
We never take more than, first of all, I've talked about this with my corporate friends, that if we took more than 2 weeks for a vacation, we wouldn't have a job. So like as an executive,
right.
You can't take that much time off unless you're in this giant executive company. But at the end of the day, most other countries believe in more vacation than the average American person or company believes in. So anyway.
I like that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even in Canada, I was always so shocked at, everybody took like 2-week vacations or 3 weeks, and their maternity leave is like a year, 2 years. It's crazy.
More reasons for me to love Canada.
I know, right? Yay,
for
Canada,
some reason,
we love you.
I love you, Canadians.
I know, they are pretty awesome. I agree. And so, needless to say, this was Saturday night, September 15th, that, again, I'm not sure how much the groups had spent time together, but on this night.
But they had met.
Yep. And on this night, they were both at the same bar.
Okay.
And they were with their friends, both their prospective friends. They were partying with each other, but they were also partying with a lot of foreign tourists because a lot of tourists are there, right?
Nobody's a stranger.
Australia, England, you name it.
Fun.
And I know that I read somewhere they must have hit it off, number one. And I know I read somewhere that it was David's last night there before he was heading home. And I'm not sure, though, if it was Hannah's, too, right? So I'm just not sure about that. But anyway, I'm writing a little note if anybody goes, why are you pausing? Okay, so with that, the CCT, the closed caption TVs, or,
CCTV,
they show the two left together around 1 a.m. holding hands, little canoodling.
That's sweet.
Yeah, they're heading towards the beach.
Oh.
I know. Unfortunately, Annie, the next day around dawn, just about 100 feet or 30 meters from their hotel, a beach cleaner stumbled across two bodies, and they were the bodies of Hannah and David.
Son of a gun.
They were half naked.
And you knew that was coming. I did, but something bad.
They were half naked. They were bloodied and beaten. And nearby, they found a bloody hoe and a wooden club that were found near the scene.
Good grief.
I know, right? And later, an autopsy revealed that both victims were hit by hard objects, resulting in head and face wounds. David also had scratches on his back and water in his lungs, indicating drowning. And Hannah's body also indicated she had been raped. Due to the crime's brutality, there were concerns that the murders may affect Thailand's tourism, especially the backpacker's paradise, because Thailand is known as a backpacker's paradise. And the national authorities, because they were so concerned about, the
safety,
the
tourism,
right? They were more concerned about how things looked. They really expedited the investigation into these murders. So that sounds like a good thing.
Plus side.
However, Annie,
I won't get all crabby.
As we learned, the Thai police may not always do things the right way. The scene was contaminated immediately after the discovery of bodies. There was a ton of people, like officials, journalists, even bewildered tourists were seeing, walking through the area while evidence was still being gathered. In fact, gruesome photos of the bloodied corpses circulated online, either leaked by officials and even taken by passerby tourists, right?
Well, it's 2014, you said, right?
Yeah,
so people had cell phones.
Yep. And again, they're not always right on how we would do things in the U.S., right? Cordon off the area, everything. In fact, I will tell you this of how weird things are. Right before the tide came in that day, the police lined up 20 locals to see if their footprints matched to any of them in the sand.
Oh, my God.
Like, that was their first, let's line them up, see if these footprints match.
Jeez.
It was just crazy. And Thailand's forensics chief, his name is Dr. Portnip Rathasunanan, I don't know, we're going to say Rasman, has said that by not using trained specialists, police contradicted the principles of forensic science, you think? Forensic evidence is processed independently in the U.S. or in the U.K. And many other jurisdictions around the world. It's really safeguarding a proper chain of custody, right? Yeah. But in Thailand, the police perform the entire process.
Oh, that's not a good idea. Just saying.
Here's a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
I agree. So within days of the killings, Thailand's government was really tripping over itself. General Prayut Chan-ocha, who, by the way, installed himself as prime minister, because again, this isn't a normal country, right, that we think of as having a democratic society of voting and things.
Not one that we're familiar with.
Right. Yeah. Appeared to blame the victims. So this prime minister stated that tourists think our country is beautiful and is safe, so they can do whatever they want. But I ask, will they survive in Thailand if they dress in bikinis?
Oh.
Only if they're beautiful.
What the F?
Okay, so I want you to think about that. He says, everyone thinks our country is beautiful and safe. They can do whatever they want. But I ask, will they survive in Thailand if they dress in bikinis? And then only if they're not beautiful. And I'm
only if they're not beautiful.
Right.
I thought you said only if they're beautiful.
No, only if they're not beautiful. So I'm cracking up because I wore a bikini and was in Thailand. Nothing happened to me.
Shut up. The bad people just didn't see you. Good Lord.
Okay, so when
what a fucking stupid comment.
I know. Well, listen,
sorry, if you're beautiful and you wear a bikini, I'm sorry, bitch. You need to be raped and murdered.
Yeah.
Okay,
I know, right?
I'm shutting it. I'm not saying bad things about Thailand.
And I will say, though, when he later apologized for this remark, he made a second blunder.
Well, I hope he should have been fired.
I know. Implying that foreign migrant workers, which there was about 3,000 in Koh Tao at the time, that they were guilty.
They're going to get blamed, yeah.
He goes, we have to help take care of our nation and not let the not so good people mingle with us, such as these unregistered alien workers. We can't let them work like that. It's dangerous and it causes damage to our country. Now, I mean, crazy, right?
Yeah, whatever.
And it's not the first time authorities in Thailand have made shocking remarks surrounding attacks on British nationals, right?
Yeah.
Or U.S. Let me give you an example. There was a British backpacker who was allegedly raped in Thailand, and she was, again, it was appeared, though, that the blame by a senior police officer was put on her and the bar because she was drunk when she left the bar.
She shouldn't have been drinking and she shouldn't have been having fun.
Yes, this 24-year-old. So this 24-year-old told police she was attacked while on vacation. A lot of people in the UK say holiday.
Yeah.
She was in northern Thailand, and she was staying in the town of Pai when. Or she was saying, so the young woman had been seen at a bar when she left in the early hours, and it's claimed that she said she was walking back to her room, and a man rode up to her on a motorcycle and offered her a ride back to her hotel. And after agreeing, the man then allegedly instead drove her to a wooded area. And according to the police report, her attacker then raped her, but incredibly, a senior officer blamed the area's late-night drinking and the fact that the victim was allegedly drunk for the horrifying attack. In fact,
it's just called she's vulnerable.
Right.
Not her fault.
Deputy Police Chief said the main factor that led to the incidents was because of the entertainment established that was open later than the time prescribed by law, which made the tourists become drunk and senseless.
Okay.
So they're saying the bar was open too late, past its time that it was supposed to be, and that caused her to get drunk and senseless. And then speaking at a news conference, he added that his officers now will enforce strict operating hours at the bars in these tourist destinations.
I must say, though, you can't fix stupid.
You're right. He said they must strictly adhere to the closing time. If they allow any establishment to disobey the closing time, the officers in charge will punish them. Anyway, so this is just another example. This is just another example of police blaming the victim and that. And so, by the way, I hear they did... on that case, that little case I just shared, that they did arrest the man.
Good.
But he denied it. He's saying that the sex was consensual. So,
of course.
Yeah. Anyway, back to our backpackers.
Yes,
again,
okay. All right.
Okay, you know that the police just sometimes are going to blame you or blame the establishment, not really the perpetrators. So police have conducted the sweep of the hotels and of the workers' residence around there for clues and continually said, Thais wouldn't do this. This should not have happened in Thailand. It's going to affect our image in the eyes of the international country, said this prime minister. And the defense minister said police were working to make an arrest as soon as possible. We're focusing on migrant workers because of the surrounding witnesses and evidence, including video footage.
Oh, well, okay.
So we are sweeping hotels, bars, businesses, and residents of migrant workers on the beach to find this suspect. Now, another police official said, a colonel said that investigators were looking at a group of bar employees and had questioned another foreigner group also. So... Lots of things. He said, this morning we surrounded 3 locations, including the residence of migrant workers, to search and collect DNA. And, so there was a lot of immediate movement on this. In fact, when the locals found out that next morning, locals blocked the pier so that they couldn't get on a boat or something, right? So it was even the locals were trying to help out.
But they weren't keeping an open mind. It was just immediately, it's the migrant workers' fault.
Well, it was anybody's fault, right? Because it was migrant workers, but wait, because they promised they were going to catch the killers of Hannah and David, right? And again, that's Hannah Witheridge and David Miller.
Okay.
And now the Royal Thai Commissioner pledged again that the police would be, they would find the people responsible for this horrendous crime. They're going to be brought to justice, right?
Yes.
And he seemed to be focused at that job at hand, but within a week, very little progress had been made. So first, after talking a lot about migrants, now they immediately went to a British tourist that were blamed. There were 2 brothers. It was a brother named Chris Ware. Chris was 24 at the time, and his brother was 27. And they were suspected in playing a part in the brutal murder of David and Hannah by the police in Thailand. Police were suspicious of wounds on Chris's hands, but he insisted they were a result of an accident well before... David was found, dead.
Well, proper forensics would have been able to.
Well, and on Chris's Facebook page is a picture of the 2 brothers, right, James and Chris, really having fun, and it's proof he's telling the truth because his right hand is bandaged.
So he had wounds way before the incident.
Yeah. So. And so he stressed his innocence during the height of this terrible deal on social media, on Facebook. He wrote, "Don't believe the media. I'm going through the worst tragedy of my life. We are with the tourist police, helping with inquiries and being well looked after." So, first of all, I don't believe what the media... which the media is usually reporting what the police tell them. And then, we're being well looked after. I feel like they were almost forced to say that. Yeah, because I don't think they felt that way. Anyway,
that's what I was thinking. That what an odd.
I know, it's just
to say that.
But his message saw a big outpouring of support from friends in Jersey who were becoming increasingly angry. Like everybody in the UK was becoming angry of how these Weir brothers were treated. And so all of a sudden they were dramatically cleared by the bungling Thai police after they underwent DNA tests.
So they have some DNA that they could use.
They do.
Did they have any fingerprints? Do you know?
Yep, they did on that.
Because I was going to say, if they left the weapons there, I doubt if it's in Thailand that they're going to be wearing gloves.
I don't think it's fingerprints as much more as DNA.
Okay.
Yeah. So then another British man who shared a room with Miller, his friend that was traveling with him, right? She was traveling with 3 girlfriends. He was traveling with a buddy. They labeled him a suspect because they believed it was a crime of passion. That he, wanted to, he also wanted to have sex with Hannah or something. And so there was this nationwide manhunt for him, because what happened is that the police had told the man that, hey, don't leave until we give you more. We want to question you more. He wasn't arrested, but he wanted to be questioned.
Don't leave
and the man took off.
Oh, that's not a good sign.
Right. And so there was this big manhunt, and he really felt that, the police chief kept saying, I know this is jealousy, and this is the key to solving the crime, and it's why they were hit so hard. It was such a bad crime. But again, he was cleared.
Okay.
And back to finding blame. The killers.
Yeah.
Right? And so then the lowly paid Burmese migrants, the immigrants, another image was released of a man said to be prime suspect. Mm-hmm. He was of Asian appearance, and he was caught on CCTV acting suspicious near the crime scene. He's seen walking up and down the business premises near the beach around 5 a.m. Okay. However, the police, again, cleared that person.
Okay.
And then the Brits were blamed once again. There was a gentleman named Sean McKenna. Now, Sean was also traveling in Thailand when him and David realized they were both in Thailand. They were friends, but they didn't come together. And so they were like, oh my gosh, we're both in Thailand. They may have seen it on social media, whatever. And so they had intended to catch up when, when they both found out that they were on Koh Tao on the same day, and that David was going to leave the next day. Remember, this is David's last night. And so Sean was supposed to meet up with David, but Sean fell asleep. Oh. And he woke to the news that David and Hannah had been found bludgeoned to death.
Oh my gosh.
And Sean wrote on Facebook, my mate Dave lost his life on Koh Tao. We were meant to meet up when I found out we were both there at the same time, but I fell asleep. He was killed that night. I feel effing terrible. I love you so effing much, brother. I know you tried to save her. You are the most honorable guy I've ever met. I will miss you terribly. I'm so sorry I didn't come out with you that night. Really, my heart is breaking.
Oh, that is heartbreaking. I felt the emotion just for a split second of what he was thinking or feeling.
But again, the police were suspicious.
They were suspicious of him.
Yep. But finally, he too was released of that suspicion. So
good.
Yeah, and again, the defense minister, we are working to make an arrest as soon as possible. We're focusing now on migrant workers because of surrounding witnesses and evidence and video footage, which again is also
funny. That sounds
funny.
familiar.
I know, right?
Video footage. I think it.
Well,
what do they have footage of?
Exactly.
CCTV of them
they just kept
walking.
saying, we have to help take care of our nation and not let these not so good people mingle with us.
Implying it's someone else.
Right. So, as you know, investigators had already steered their attention to migrant workers, right? DNA testing of casual workers was introduced, and many migrants complained of pretty rough interrogations, with some claiming they were even scalded with boiling water.
Oh, my gosh.
To try to get to confess.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, police deny these allegations, though, right?
Well, of course they do.
And then the police chief revealed that a cigarette was discovered about 50 meters from the scene in the Koh Tao, where Hannah and David were killed. And as reported by the Bangkok Post, he said that the DNA of two men, I mean, how do you know it's two men? Two DNA samples, right? But they, it's Thai police. DNA of two men were found on the cigarette butt, which matched the DNA found on Hannah.
Okay.
And so, this one of the majors, so there's a lot of police involved in this, said it appeared as though the men had shared a cigarette at the same time before the two young victims walked past them shortly before they were killed. So, amid pressure to produce results, I mean, they haven't found the perpetrators in over a week now, going into 2 weeks after the murders. As I said, those police named even more suspects every other day. So I just gave you a few, but they are naming even more.
Wow.
I know, crazy, right?
Well, if they want to give the appearance that they're doing something,
right?
What better than to say, well, now we're looking this direction, and whether or not it was just a comment that they really weren't doing a lot of investigative work.
Exactly. So, soon after, though, two young Burmese men were arrested. The two men from Myanmar's Rakhine State were working in the hospitality industry on the island at the time of the killings. Now, just so you know, and our audience listeners know, there's close to 3 million Burmese that live in Thailand. They commonly experience very low pay and very poor conditions. And it's not unknown. Different human rights groups say that it's just not unknown for police to blame them for crimes. And so these two Burmese men, it was Zaw Lin and Wei Phao.
Okay.
It should be Pao because it's PH. Yeah, so Zaw Lin and Wei Phao, also known as Winza. I mean, let's be real. I can't do all that. Anyway, Zaw Lin and Wei Phao were arrested almost 2 weeks after the bodies were found. And these are 22-year-old boys, that initially confessed to the killings, however, later retracted these statements.
Were they
saying they'd been tortured?
Were they the ones saying they'd had boiling water?
Well, no, that's others, right?
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Well, how can you even trust any? I mean, in the States, they would just throw that out.
Exactly.
What was that, forced confession?
Well, the police had quickly elicited a confession, and after a crazy reconstruction of the murders before the media, so they took these two guys out. Once they've got them to convince, they then took them to the beach. They had them reenact the murders, show us how you did the murders and rapes.
Okay.
And did a staged reenactment, and then they also did a session of penitent prayers by the accused. So those guys got down on their knees and prayed and said they were, so sorry and trying to get forgiveness.
So this is orchestrated by the police to tell them to do this? Did they tell them how to act?
Yeah.
Or did they say, just go from your memory, or no, this is what I want you to do. I want you to stand here.
Later on, I'll tell you how in trial that comes out, that the police told them what to do.
Good frickin' grief.
I know, right? So this is just so terrible. Weird. Can you even imagine in the U.S. taking a suspect back to the crime and making him reenact it in front of the media?
Gosh.
Yeah. And so, again, they had really hoped by doing this reenactment and getting this confession, this case looked closed, right?
Yeah, let's just hang a noose around their neck right now while they're acting.
Yeah, but unfortunately it unraveled just as quickly. After receiving independent legal counsel, Zaw Lin and Wei Phao, who had no criminal records, claimed that they had been tortured during the investigation, and then, of course, they recanted their statements. Now, these guys are two of an estimated 2 million migrants in Burmese that, along with smaller numbers from Cambodia and Laos, currently working, like I said, in these really low-paid jobs, which in Thailand, it's thriving compared to those countries around them. And honestly, they work like slaves and in slave-like conditions for super pitiful wages and occupations that are typically described as 3D.
What does that mean?
Exactly. Dirty, dangerous, and degrading.
Oh, gosh.
Right? And so some work on fishing boats for years without seeing land. Some getting passed between, trawlers. They're catching fish and squid and shrimp for, by the way, American dinner tables. Thailand is the world's third largest seafood exporter. Mm-hmm.
I'm so sorry, people.
I know. So other labor for long hours under the burning sun farming pineapples, but they're exposed to really hazardous doses of pesticides and other chemicals. I mean, it just is awful. But unfortunately,
they're just disposable workers.
They flee extreme poverty. This is a chance to have something better.
And this is better.
Yeah, and there was a lot of violence in Burma, which is Myanmar anyway.
Yeah.
And it really, if just for your like, well, why is there such extreme poverty and violence? Well, it's had a century of civil war and really had some pretty suffocating military and government dictatorship. And when that happens, you'll find that, it's unrest, and which also means poverty and violence.
So when we get really down on our country or our leading authorities, we should really maybe make a comparison and be
continually remembering we are very in a wonderful, and that the things of voting, things like that are so important in our country because again, we'd never want to be that way. So these two guys, they know this poverty really well. Now, speaking exclusively to Time. At the Koh Samui prison, K Samui prison, they both appear they said they appeared much younger than 22 years old. Like they had pimples and, like a real teen, right?
Yeah.
And so Zalin said, my father died when I was very young. So I left school at age 8 and started helping my mother in the fields when I was just 10. But facing worsening poverty around 2 years ago, he paid a broker 5,000 baht, which is about $150 US, to transport him to Koh Tao. And he had heard he was very heartened and looking forward because the tales he'd heard of fellow villagers who'd, they'd eked out a successful living there. And so, he decided he wanted to come over to Thailand, paid the brokers, and since then he has managed to send back almost $2,000 to help his destitute family, which would be that's years of working.
Yeah.
And
how
he
old
says,
was he really?
I mean, he was only 22. Remember? But he went over very young.
Okay, well, that's what I was wondering.
Right.
Was he really 22 if he looked younger and had acne and stuff?
I think he probably was 22, but I think...
All right.
I
thought you were going to say he's like 16.
And the older I get, the more I go, 22-year-olds are just babies.
They really are.
I know. So, and he was proud that he goes, it's not much, but at least it helps my family. I wish I could do more, right? So, again, seemed like good guys, and to be able to work these illegal Burmese migrants, they had to pay, by the way, a monthly bribe. Again, this is so typical over there. They have 500 baht, $15 each month, plus another 500 baht if they wanted to use a motorbike without a Thai driver's license. And so it made me think when I heard this and read this, I was like, oh my gosh, remember in my story, I talk about the fact that I wanted to go on these little bikes, these little motorbikes, and but my husband was like, no way, we're not going. But I had talked about it so much, I convinced a ton of other people that we were around to do it, and they did it, and everyone got pulled over and arrested, remember?
Oh,
they all had to pay fines, which really are bribes, because they didn't have the right. I mean, like literally a block from the police station, they're all pulled over and, have to pay these bribes.
I think it's funny that the fines are called bribes.
Yes, so really, that's what it is. So think about this. If I pay you $50 a month, a 500 baht, $15 a month, I can use a motorbike without a Thai license. So again, you might want to bribe. I know that's also kind of dangerous. But anyway, these guys usually work 7 days a week for a very pittance amount. They sleep in bamboo shacks erected into like jungle clearances. And, here's the thing. They possess, though, no official status or documents. And so their vulnerability is so extreme. There are a lot of complaints of rape, extortion, physical violence. They're just the Burmese people are really treated as second-class citizens. And earlier you had said they're just commodities. And as dehumanizing...
I wished I would have used that good word. I think I said... What did I say?
I don't know. I thought it was that smart word. But they say, dehumanizing as it sounds, they are a commodity for some people. So it's right in my notes, Annie. You read my mind. Anyway, during jailhouse interviews, they were asked, do you have a message for any of your fellow people considering working here in Thailand? And Wai says, be careful where you go out at night, as you might step in the wrong place.
How terrifying.
I know. He admits that they were playing guitar and drinking beer on the evening in question. However, they laughed. But police said the pair were motivated once again by sexual jealousy after seeing the two Britons together on the beach.
Okay.
Both gentlemen say they were tortured to confess. Why Fio? You guys, once again, I always need to, during a broadcast or at the beginning or at the end, say my apologies for how much I've murdered everybody's name. Whether you're...
Those aren't easy.
Whatever name it is. But, even the easy names I seem to murder. Oh, I didn't murder David Miller, though.
There we go.
There you go.
See?
Anyway, so these guys both say that they were tortured to confess. So Pio says that the officers removed his clothing and left him naked and in a freezing room for 20 minutes. He goes, they beat me. They put a bag over my head, humiliating me by taking pictures and a video. They threatened to kill me, saying, we will throw you into the sea and feed your corpse to the fish. Now, Zalin said
What a surprise they confessed.
Right. Now, Zalin said in court he was stripped and blindfolded during questioning to force him to confess to raping and murdering Hannah and then killing David. He also claimed that he was beaten by the police and told his body would be dismembered, burned, and dumped at sea. And he also added that his DNA was taken by force and used as evidence against him, which that was interesting. Shove a cotton ball in his mouth. I don't know. Anyway, Lynn, who worked in bars and restaurants on the island, he's previously told a court he too was suffocated with plastic bags until he confessed to the crime. And he also told in court that when a Muslim Burmese translator asked some different things about religious conflicts and stuff, he said, and it was all had to do, which is so weird because it had nothing to do with the murders, but it was about the unrest in Burma. And he said, he asked him if he had been there during this time. And he said, I told the translator no, that I had already been in Thailand. Which, by the way, what does this have to do with this? Yeah. Anyway, he goes, the translator punched me. He also claimed that same guy threatened to kill him if he didn't follow strict police guidelines at the reenactments on the crime at the beach, right? Yeah. When they did the reenactments. He said that they were both told exactly what to do during the reenactments, and that police then, afterwards, gave them painkillers for all the chest injuries they had caused.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. If you put a plastic bag over my face, I will admit to anything.
Right.
I have claustrophobia. I have little lungs, and it wouldn't take much for me to... I did it. I don't even know what I did, but yes.
I know.
I did it.
It's so sad. And you think that, no, I wouldn't confess to something I didn't do. You would if your life is...
Look, I'm having to inhale and
Here's a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Exhale. Just thinking about it.
I know. It's crazy. Now, Thailand's National Human Rights Commission, they investigated these allegations.
Good.
But progress was very slow. And not... Did you just burp?
No. I went, It did. It made a funny sound.
Again, if you think this is just true crime, it also has some funny things in it. Okay, going back to the... Anyway.
Yeah.
So even though the Human Rights Commission, they investigated, the progress was very slow. And let me tell you part of why it was so slow. Because 4 of the meetings that were supposed to be held, for the police representatives failed to turn up. They didn't even show up for the meetings.
Oh.
And they deny any mistreatment. And, of course, no officer has ever been charged.
Well, that's one way to slow things down.
Right. And other human rights groups, including Amnesty International, which I have heard is a really big one, they became involved in the trial, and they really warned about the potential, miscarriages of justice.
Yeah.
He said, the fact that these 2 Burmese suspects have been made scapegoats this quickly was just one part of this sham of a police investigation that doesn't warrant any trust or faith in the whole case. Now, there was a Thai political blogger, and he said, it also hints at a general attitude by many Thais towards foreigners from neighboring countries, mostly workers, as being lower than themselves. And so then the Amnesty International director for Southeast Asia, his name is Shampa Patel, he said that the torture claims required an independent investigation. The Thai police force has a long and disturbing track record of using torture and other forms of ill treatment to extract confessions. This is far from an isolated case. The Thai authorities must start taking concrete steps to stamp out torture, not just doing lip service to do so. Now, around 1,000 people did gather in front of the Thai embassy, calling for these two to be freed. In fact, dozens of police stood guard outside the embassy. They even closed a lane in front of the building. Some protesters held up signs saying, "Shameless Thailand government," and others shouted, "We want justice," and they actually shouted it in English. Now, the two men, right? They appear in court wearing thick shackles on their wrists and huge, thick shackles on their ankles. But they had also drawn sympathy from a group of British nationals living there that would visit them in jail every week and bring them food and things, right? But they really did appear in court as they are guilty because they had such thick shackles on hands and wrists.
That they're so dangerous, we have to keep them chained up like animals.
The 18-day trial of the two defendants was divided into really 3 equal parts over several weeks. That began that next summer, and then that verdict was expected in October, and they could face the death penalty if they were convicted.
Oh, gosh.
I know. Prosecutors say the DNA evidence collected from that cigarette butts and a condom and the body of the victims link the two men to the killings.
But now I have to wonder, really?
I know, right?
Who did the testing, the forensics? Oh, the same police that tortured him?
Well,
the boiling water on him?
And defense lawyers had been requesting the evidence for re-examinations, and they never got it.
Oh, of course not.
An autopsy revealed that both victims were hit hard by a hard object. You know, I told you that Miller had head wounds, scratches on his back, water in his lungs indicated he was drowning. And Hannah had been raped and hit several times on the head. And, you know, both bodies were found semi-naked. Hannah also had tearing present at the vulva, bruising on her perineum, and a bite mark on her nipple. So DNA was supposedly collected from those 3 areas and was sent to police forensics lab for analysis. However, we know that's done by the police, and we also know her clothes were never tested for DNA.
Oh.
Yes.
Why do that? You know.
I know. So a defense team from Bangkok, this is really cool, is comprised of 20 lawyers. But here's the deal. They were only permitted 30 minutes to meet with the men. They requested to delay the hearing and allowing more time, but it was denied by the judge. A 900-page police report was produced to guide the prosecution's case, but the defense was not allowed to see that report until the trial began. Public prosecutors, people were saying there's flaws or things that needs to be fixed. Bottom line, the suspects were indicted and charged in that trial for premeditated murder, killing to conceal a criminal offense, rape, illegal entry into Thailand, staying in the country without permission, and then wife Pio was also charged with stealing Miller's phone.
Okay.
Now, the defense argued that the investigation was flawed, again, due to the alleged mishandling of the evidence, and of course the abuse of suspects and intimidation of the witnesses, right? And by this, the Migrant Worker Rights Network was also now involved too.
Good.
So one of the boys told the court during the last 2 days of witness testimony that a police officer took photos of him naked. They also kicked me in the back, punched me, slapped me, threatened to chop off my arms and legs and throw my body in the sea to feed the fish. They also said they would take me into another room and electrocute me. Police told me that if I had no passport, I have no rights. Right? Imagine how scary that has to be.
Yeah. And I was thinking, too, on the forensics part, when they had independent forensic people wanting to perform tests, that if the police really wanted to confirm, we are right, these guys did do it, they would have handed it right over to him and let him do it. So
exactly.
Which just, I think, to me, proves 100% that they're wrong.
Yeah.
They set these guys
going
up.
back to why they confessed is,
crooked.
The police are telling him he has no passport, he has no rights, and the interrogators also said, Burmese migrants have been killed before for not cooperating, right? I mean, again, no wonder they're so scared.
Yeah.
And then, remember how I said he was charged with stealing her phone?
Yeah.
Or David's phone?
Uh-huh.
Well, police said that David's phone, Mr. Miller's phone, mobile phone, had been found in Zalin's home. Although it was previously reported that the phone was actually handed to police by a friend of the victim.
Oh, I wonder how that phone got there.
Right?
The police would not have planted that, would they?
So the case against the men really rested heavily on sperm collected from the crime scene. Samples, they say, were taken from Hannah's body. But again, remember when the defense asked for an independent retest, they failed to retrieve the samples, and one officer suggested they had been destroyed. Again, the defense argued that the investigation was flawed, not only for the forensic evidence, the lack of legal representation during interrogations, the intimidation. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And so the courts ordered the DNA to be retested. And they revealed that they said the samples from the body were used up. But we can provide you a DNA sample from the murder weapon. Remember, there was a hoe and and so... however, the leading forensic expert in the country, the head of the country's Central Institute Forensic Science, found that the DNA on the hoe didn't match the suspects.
Oh, what a surprise.
I know. And so all of this is, you think, okay, come on, they're not going to be convicted. I mean, but at the end of the day, the defense really struggled to find members of the public willing to even testify at the trial. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But many of them feared retribution, right? And they also say several CCTV cameras near the crime scene all of a sudden were reported to be non-functional, and that the cameras near the pier weren't checked ever by the police before they were deleted.
I can't see any more corruption that could qualify to throw a case out.
I mean, even the DNA analysis, which came back to the court, came back by a one-page summary with 4 supporting pages, and some of it handwritten.
Okay. We're working really hard here.
And there was an Australian forensic scientist that was brought in by the defense team, and she claims that the timeline of the DNA extraction was really wrong. It's what a lie, dubious. That a rapid analysis of a DNA samples that had happened in less than 12 hours, which she said was unusual because extracting DNA from mixed samples is extremely difficult and time consuming.
I would think so.
Yeah. However, even though she was brought in and said this, she was ultimately not allowed to testify for the defense. And media, though, reports they speculated it was because the defense was wary of calling on a foreign expert. Because here's what happens. When, again, you're not dealing with the most, it's corrupt at the end of the day. And so what happened is the police were afraid if they called this foreign expert from Australia, right, that what happens is that the judge will think that, this appears as if you're trying to undermine the Thai justice system and could bias the judges in this case. So the defense was, right.
I'm sorry, that makes no sense. Even though the defense
brought them in, they knew they couldn't use them because the minute they used them, they for sure would get a guilty verdict because the judge would have said, because they're so up their own asses in how wonderful their country is that they're not going to allow you to undermine that or talk bad about it. So they're automatically going to think you're guilty. I mean, the whole thing is crazy, guys, right? And it just is, again, really crazy. And as I said, that police case was damaged further because they said the DNA on the hose, the garden hose, didn't match the defendants. And again, it was just crazy, right?
I guess I don't understand the whole concept or their line of thinking she's for the defense, was she forensics person? But what she has to say, we're not going to listen to her because
even though they agreed with her, the defense agreed, they knew they would lose the case immediately had they put her on the stand, because that's, again, going against what the country is, and they don't like that. And so, again, is
it a judge that's going to make the decision, or do they have a jury like we do?
Judge. And I heard judges, so I don't really know how that handles.
Either way, I don't trust any of their process.
They don't want to. They've rushed this along.
Yeah,
they don't want their island. It's one of the world's most popular
tourist places.
Yeah, they don't want their image ruined.
Don't they know that they're ruining it by themselves?
I know.
By being
so you think
unlawful in the law area?
All of this stuff is just so, up and down. And so
Jeez.
I will say, though, that I hear that the defendant's team did get a note to one of the newspapers called The Guardian, and the defendant said they were confident in the justice process. He goes, "We were not involved. We don't know how they can try and match us to these crimes. You can see that we had nothing to do with what happened. We, too, are confused how they can try and link us to this crime." So what do you think happened, Annie?
Well, if it's going to go like the rest of this story has gone, they're going to get convicted, because we're not talking about people that are looking for justice. They're looking for an answer and a scapegoat. So.
Exactly. Well, in 2015, they were both found guilty and sentenced to death. The guilty verdict resulted in widespread protests in Myanmar. Protesters called for the release of the two suspects who believed they were innocent and, of course, scapegoated for the crime. But the protests in a whole other country angered the Thai prime minister, who believed these demonstrations in a whole other country were a plot to instigate and hurt the government.
Well, I'm sorry, dude. You have no control of what goes on in other countries, so shut your fucking mouth.
Guess what? He announced that he was going to order all security-related agencies to track down those people that were demonstrating. Right?
They didn't listen to him, did they?
I know. So the case was appealed again and again, several times, and
you only get like 3 appeals, don't you? Right? Well, that's in the U.S. But
so anyway, leading to the Supreme Court to eventually uphold the verdict of guilty and the verdict of a death sentence. I know,
that's terrible.
The Supreme Court ruled that forensic evidence was clear, credible, and detailed.
Oh, really?
And it refuted suggestions that police had mishandled this case.
Oh, yeah, the police,
right? Now, years later, a few years later, the Thai king, he passed a mass royal pardon for those on death row who have exhausted all their appeal options and have never received a royal pardon. So, because this is their first royal pardon, they are entitled to receive it. Meaning they were no longer in the execution, quote-unquote, queue.
So they weren't released. I thought that's what a pardon was.
It means that now, the royal pardon, by the way, the royal pardon was created in the spirit of the king's birthday to offer convicted prisoners the opportunity to reverse their behavior and become good citizens.
Oh, okay.
How nice of him, right?
Yeah.
So instead of on death row, I now get to spend the rest of my life in prison. So I will say the families of him were happy they're no longer on death row, but these two men that...
Were they pardoned?
Well, they were pardoned, but pardoned from death row.
Pardoned from dying, but not pardoned from prison.
Right.
Okay.
So really nice of that.
I guess that's a little better, considering
exactly.
they're innocent.
Here's the deal, though.
Probably.
Many people in Thailand know what really happened.
Really?
An alternative narrative to one of the one that's offered by the police, right?
Yeah.
Which is really popular among residents of Koh Tao, is that the assailant was linked to powerful families on the islands.
That makes complete sense.
Mm-hmm.
I picture, because I watch movies and stuff, and crime shows, I picture a couple kids that are like these rotten little arrogant asshole boys who come from wealthy families who they don't really get in trouble for anything because they can be they can be washed away with money. So
exactly. So there's many Britons and Americans, a ton, that live on these different islands, right? And the trial was actually held on the larger island, the largest island, mm-hmm. and they said it was a fortress-like court, and they say it's just all the residents say it's, whether it's Britons, Americans, or actual Thais that live there, say it becomes so apparent very quickly that these islands are run by mafia-type family. You know, Koh Tao is known as this laid-back place, but even cocaine and crystal meth, which, by the way, it's called the crazy drug, they are super easy to find, and their trade is controlled by families on the island. And I could see when we were in Thailand how easy it could be found. These families are powerful enough to make deals with the local authorities, and they're seen as long-standing. They're actually also seen, these families not only are in cahoots with the police, but they're a long-standing stabilizing force on these islands that are far from the central government. And so in some places, the police and organized crime are uncomfortably close together because they don't have the police force, and this organized crime kind of oversees the island, right?
So basically, those families have a lot of power because they have a lot of people, because they have a lot of money, and then you're sort of forced into doing what they want, whether you agree with it or not,
right,
whether you're police or not. And then the police feel pressured because there are mafia-like people that will off their families if they don't comply to what
absolutely. I mean, think about it. You know, a lot of people believe that, you know, the directions of the investigation were not being, you know, they weren't only looking in one direction, or they dismissed things. In fact, Thai media, there was some Thai media organizations that reported from court from much of the trial. However, one translator who was employed by Sky News said that she was warned off by helping anyone by the Thai mafia after working them for one day.
I was just going to say, to be a journalist in that area would have to be dangerous. I know. If you're wanting to report the truth.
Right. In an opinion piece in the Bangkok Post, they wrote that practically no one believes that Zalin and Wei Pao were really brutally murdered these English tourists. That the consensus that they are scapegoats. That an overwhelmingly public skepticism stems from the police's long-standing notoriety for arresting the poor and powerless to save rich criminals who can afford to buy their innocence. Rumors began to circulate with residents on the island say the island is really controlled by this mafia who have true information about the true culprits, and that truly the police is covering for them. So now, tourist arrivals kind of dropped in the months following this, but really, there was really lasting tourism effect. And you need to understand more about these families and how they run the island, you need to know that, you know, they were a penal colony from 1933 to 1947, and they have that kind of sense of self-sufficiency and being very isolated. And so, being that they are really far from those official oversight, you know, of the government and the police,
they kind of do what they want.
The control falls to the owners of, you know, these booming businesses, which are usually hotels and resorts that were developed and usually owned by
a big major family.
Yeah. And feuding here is super common, and I guess it's pretty vicious. A gentleman named Greg Shepard, he was from Luton in the UK. He told Time that he witnessed once a man getting shot in the face in a bar north of Sairee Beach in the mid-2000s. He said they took the victim away in the pickup truck, and the barman just got out a mop and cleaned up the blood.
Oh, yeah, because that's what you do. It happens all the time.
In general, tourists are almost comically unaware of this undercurrent, this horrible undercurrent.
Here's a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
An open secret that organized crime is rampant here on these islands.
I'm sorry, I'm a big chicken shit. Maybe that's a real reason why I don't travel, besides being tired.
Well, it's interesting because I will tell you, I felt that undercurrent. I could tell through, I could feel that there is a bad side to this the whole time we were there. I didn't feel it as much when we were in Phi Phi as I did in Bangkok. But yes, you could feel this not trusting, right? It was just a feeling.
Yeah.
And again, that's where you go, I have to be very careful because if I don't trust, I can't get in trouble, right?
Right, I got to be aware of my environment and what I'm doing.
Now, of course, these families, you can imagine their number one trade is what?
Alcohol?
Drugs,
right?
Oh, no. They play a key role. They say that the reek of marijuana is commonplace, even in prominent beachfront bars. I saw that. Well, cocaine and that crazy, they call it yaba, crystal meth.
Yeah.
They're not hard to find. In fact, they were saying, and I know this too, they said not that I know this part, but it said one establishment, joints are sold for $6. A magic mushroom milkshake costs $20. Now that I'd be interested in trying. Nice and strong, says the tattooed barman when he gives it to you. And yet, people who run the island and police, there are no drugs. In fact, the fact that they say there are no drugs here makes you go, really? I mean, there are definitely a lot. But I think what's interesting, the reason I saw that is things are super cheap there, right? I remember when I was charged 60 cents for a bottle of water, I was like, are you kidding? Everywhere else it's only 10. 10 cents for a bottle of water, right? Maybe 20 cents.
To me, I think, not being a drug person, never really have done drugs.
So these drugs sound really cheap.
Well, I'm going to say, if all they sold were the joints, wouldn't that just be a lot of laid-back, happy people?
Right? Yeah, you're right, Annie.
I'm thinking,
but
not the only
deal.
drug you're selling.
I know. So they sell this magic mushroom milkshake, which that does sound very interesting.
This sounds like a hallucinogenic, right?
But their big one is cocaine, the crystal meth. And think about it. They have the name for it, yaba. Crazy drug, right?
Yeah.
So it's crazy. Okay. And so... But however, it is very cliquey and very quiet because nobody wants to get in trouble. So there's no numbers, and here's the deal. There's a ton of expats, right? From Europe, from North America, and people go there. And Greg and I saw this because your pensions, your incomes, your 401ks, they're so much better than they would be. They go so much further than they would in Europe or they would here in the U.S. And so it can really fund a carefree life in Thailand, right? So there's so many people, but I'm telling you, they're insecure. And because they're insecure, it breeds almost a compliance. That somebody said, once you've lived here for a while, you turn a blind eye to some pretty sketchy stuff. You don't want to make the waves because this gentleman,
it's dangerous.
His name was Mike Early. He's from New Zealand. He spent 6 months on the island working as a DJ. And he said, complaining about any wrongdoing may invite official questions and demands for passports, documentation.
So don't have an opinion.
People don't want to lose their time in paradise. They don't want to miss it. And so it's cheap, it's nice living, and it's really easy to ignore what happened. So these theories abound on Koh Tao about who killed Hannah, who killed David. But again, many believe the culprits are local. And by the way, these were fueled. Remember his friend who was
sad that he didn't meet him?
Well, no, the other one.
The one that traveled with him.
That the police asked them to stay so they could question him, but he left.
Right.
And that looked suspicious.
Right.
Well, guess what? The reason he left is I guess it's his friend claimed that his life was threatened by local thugs, that he better confess. And so he just freaking fled. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can see the writing on the wall.
Yeah, and then very few people, unfortunately, rallied to the defense of these two gentlemen. One of a former person, coworker, saw them. They even said, well, we noticed no changes in him, but he refused to be a character witness because he goes, I've not been threatened, but I've got too much to lose. This is the wild, wild west.
So sad.
It really is.
It just, and the culture keeps breeding more of that culture.
I know.
And they've just created this hole that nobody can really change or get out of without, I don't even know how that would change.
I agree.
How the culture would change.
Well, both of the families of the victims shared some kind words, and I think we should hear about, so Hannah was described as a beautiful, intelligent, loving young woman who poured joy into the lives of all who knew her, and said that she was selfless and caring and made each and every day a little bit more wonderful, that they were devastated and shocked to find out what happened and to lose her. The ways they did was beyond comprehension.
Right.
And Mr. Miller, David's family, said that he was hardworking, bright, conscientious young man. that he was an artist by temperament, and he was so talented. He had a creative eye that he carried with him through his life and through his degree. He had everything to look forward to. He said he was very giving to his family and friends. Everyone adored him, and of course will be sorely missed. And it just makes me
sucks.
It's sad, but here's the deal. What's weird is the families of both Hannah and David backed the Thai police. They ultimately felt that the suspects had a difficult case to answer. I know, right? You kind of wonder. That's, again, just another curve in this whole story.
Yeah, it is, because did they know everything like you've just told us?
I don't know, right?
Because I can't imagine.
But you imagine, they're trying to believe the police. These are people from the UK or from the US. Imagine, in our heads, we can't imagine the police lying to us. We really think they're there to help us. So you're listening to everything they say, and you're totally ignoring any kind of crap out there.
And you really want closure. Right. I don't know if that's even a thing, but they really want their case to be done, closed. They want answers.
I know. Well, unfortunately, though, there's another thing that happened to the Hannah's family, the Witheridge family. They suffered a couple of things. Number one, they suffered a lot of online abuse after their daughter's killing. Unfortunately, Annie, I know you're looking at, for our audience, she's looking at me shocked. And here's the deal. What people don't realize is whether something good or bad happens, there are these trolls out there that will just go on and on, whether they try to say she deserved to die or I bet she died like this. You know, they can be horrible. So there was this internet troll that was just horrific to the family after this. And here's the deal, though. What I loved about this is that the internet troll, his name was Paul Hind, Hind.
That's the troll?
Mm-hmm. He was 38 years old. He was jailed for 14 months at Newcastle Crown Court after he admitted making remarks about Hannah. Had 3 other acts described as callous and cowardly. So
good. I'm glad at least they found out who it was. So often we don't have any idea.
I know, right? And I mean,
what's the thinking that goes behind that?
There's a lot of them out there. I don't get it.
I don't get it either.
But
I mean, don't you know you're going to look like a complete asshole?
I know, but there's a story where this girl didn't even know this company that was a bridal shop in Australia. I think it's funny. We can hear her in Little Ducks. There's a company in Australia that was a bridal shop, and a lady here in the U.S. started trolling them. She saying that they lost her dress. She did this. They did horrible things. She's never even met these people. Never called them. Never talked to them. Never tried to buy a watch. No, she's already married, but she just spent a year making this company's life miserable. A living hell, where people then would read these reviews and would back out. I mean, it was just
that's
horrific.
A mental illness.
It was horrific.
I guess you can't
but here's the good deal. You know, it is heartbreak. It's tragedy. It's an illness. But, you know, I'm just so happy that this troll was found guilty.
Me too.
Because you can't just say whatever you want online.
Yeah.
And get away with it.
You shouldn't. Shouldn't be able to.
Yeah. But unfortunately, remember I said they had 2 heartbreaks?
Okay, crap. What's the other one?
Because their heartbreak continued. As their other daughter, Laura, who was 30 at the time, died just 5 years after her sister Hannah was killed.
Oh, no.
I guess she had been ill, and the family said she'd been treated in a hospital. And
I wonder if it's like because stress, cancer.
I don't know.
But stress in and of itself.
You lose one child and then you lose another. I just can't even imagine. And
I'm so sorry.
The whole thing is just sad, right? I'm so sad for the Miller family, for the Rueters family. I'm sad for the 2 gentlemen that are still sitting in jail.
That I doubt are guilty.
Right. And now, all of this, during these, you know, right after this murder, Koh Tao really earned the nickname of Death Island because of the number of Western tourists that had been, you know, killed. In fact, listen to this, Annie. So I just did a little bit of looking around. In 2012, a 32-year-old Ben Harrington died in what police said was a motorcycle crash.
Okay.
But his parents said they became suspicious of the explanation when officers tried to cremate his body the very next day.
Oh, what?
Despite years of inquiries, right?
What does?
Despite years of inquiries about her son's death, including the Freedom of Information requests submitted to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, no details had been forthcoming. And aside from Hannah and David in 2014, That year also saw the death of Nick Pearson. He was 25 from Derby, and he was found floating in the ocean on New Year's Day. His parents believe he was murdered. Then the following year, another Briton, Christina Ansley, 23, was found dead from what Thai police described as mixing alcohol with antibiotics for a chest infection.
I say we just cut back on their tourism by not going. I'm sorry.
I know you don't.
I'm sorry.
Listen to this, though. Then 29-year-old Frenchman Dimitri Provus was found hanged, with officers describing it as a suicide. However, Dimitri's family said no, or Christina's family back with the mixing alcohol. So the mixing alcohol, Christina's family, no toxology report was carried out, right?
Oh, but we're just going to guess because
Dimitri, who was found hanged, right, said it was a suicide. His family said, how could this have, he couldn't have hung himself because his hands were tied behind his back.
Oh, yeah, He's a Houdini.
And then listen to this.
He's
Luke
magic.
Miller, a bricklayer from the Isle of Wight, was then found dead in a pool on the island in 2016, with Thai police saying there was no evidence of foul play, despite his family saying they had received conflicting reports of events before his death. In 2017, a Belgium lady named Elise was found dead in the jungle of Koh Tao in what police said was a suicide by hanging. Though, again, her family says there's no way that could have happened. They believe she was murdered while trying to escape from a cult. And that same year, 2017, a Russian tourist, Valentia, she's 23, she vanished from her hostel along with her diving gear. Not a single trace has ever been found, though officials say she died at sea. And then in June of 2018, 47-year-old German Bernd Grosch was found dead near his home on the island after what authorities described as a snake bite or a heart attack.
So he wasn't a tourist, or he wasn't.
He was one of those
that lived there.
Yep. And because a lot of people live there because their money goes so much further. And they said the family said they didn't get an autopsy report. They had suspicions about the deaths.
I say hit him in the wallet.
I'm telling you, tourism did go down for a while.
Good.
It bounced back.
God damn it.
I know.
People, you just don't care.
And in the end, it is a sad ending because Hannah and David died and the two men are still jailed. So, Annie, I'm not sure that we really have a hero in this story, except here's what I figured out. We have those 20 attorneys and those human rights organizations that came and fought hard.
They did what they could.
Yeah.
Even the journalist that was trying to report.
Right. So they were the heroes in this. And the zeros,
they're every freaking where.
Right. Chances are they're the Thai police. They're the government.
They're the mafia. They're the families.
They're the families of this organized crime. So
that sucks.
Yeah.
Great story.
I know, right?
But great story given, reported on. Sorry, Thailand. I'm not going to visit you anytime
Well, my
soon.
husband says we're still going back. That if I find any more stories on Thailand, we're not.
Just don't freaking drink, okay? Keep your wits about you, man. Oh,
exactly.
Well, people, I'm really glad that you're listening to us.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, for listening to this. It's a little bit longer, but I hope you enjoyed that. And again, stay diligent and be your own hero.
Yes.
That's right.
Don't go to Thailand. Bye.
Thanks again so much for joining us, everyone. Be sure to stay connected with us on social media at both Instagram and Facebook. Our Instagram is
Heroes Zeros Podcast,
and Facebook
Heroes and Zeros, a true crime podcast. And you can listen to our podcast episodes or support or donate money to us. And you can send us your stories and just a lot more at our website, which is
heroesandzerostruecrime.com. Again, that's heroesandzerostruecrime.com. And you can email us also at heroes2zeros&more. That's the number 2, heroes2zeros&more @gmail.com.
Exactly. And you can also support us at our Patreon site now, which is
patreon.com/heroeszeros.
Thank you, everyone.